World War II in the summer of 1940, France didn't just lose a war, it lost fuel that made modern life possible. Overnight, the country had to reinvent daily life itself. A nation once filled with cars, buses, tractors, and delivery trucks suddenly fell silent. Engines stopped, roads empty, and an entire way of life collapsed. France wasn't just defeated, it was immobilized. And for millions of civilians, the question was terrifyingly simple. If we can't use gasoline anymore, how do we move and survive? This is episode 3 of Improvised France, a mini-series of brave builds, seeing how civilians built the resistance, a series exploring how ordinary people, stripped of materials, freedom, and resources, built their lives through creativity, necessity, and sheer stubborn will. Today, we're looking at one of the most dramatic transformations civilian France ever experienced: the sudden end of oil. Before France fell in 1940, it was one of the most, if not the most, motorized nation in Europe, with 1.7 million private cars, nearly 500,000 trucks and buses, and a military built around gasoline-powered mobility. But once France surrendered and the Vichy regime was installed as a German-controlled puppet government, the country was cut off from the global gasoline, or as they call it, petroleum market. The Allies blockaded Axis territories, and Germany seized what little fuel remained in France. And that's where our story begins. Gasoline, or petroleum as some call it, wasn't just for warfare, obviously. It powered vehicles and machines that kept France moving. Doctors and veterinarians making rural calls, delivery trucks supplying towns and markets, fishing boats heading out before dawn to catch some fish, tractors in the fields, generators, buses, taxis, postal vans, industrial machines, even long-distance freight. All of it depended on fuel. Before the war, France imported 2.8 million tons of petroleum in 1938, almost all of it from overseas. Daily life ran on that fuel, and despite years of political warnings, very little was done to reduce that dependency on foreign supply. So when the Allied blockade sealed off Axis-controlled Europe and France, that lifeline to fuel vanished. And when fuel allocations finally resumed under German control in late 1940, France received only 45,000 tons for civilian use, barely 20% of what France used before the war. So who was still allowed to drive? Only essential users: doctors and medical staff, police officers, firefighters, city services, essential farmers and millers, limited bus lines, certain industrial sectors, and the rail and river transport networks. Everyone else, small businessmen, craftsmen, most farmers, delivery drivers, and private motorists, were effectively grounded. And just like with most of the other rationed items we've looked at in wartime France, people turned to the black market. Some managed to keep cars running with smuggled or stolen fuel, but for most, the roads were silent. Almost overnight, cars vanished from the streets, commercial trucking collapsed, rural life slowed to a crawl. France needed a solution, a replacement for that lost fuel, and it needed it fast. With gasoline almost entirely unavailable, the French government turned to alternative fuels. Before the war, very few French vehicles ran on anything other than gasoline. By early 1941, alternative fuel conversions became the only legal way to operate most vehicles, though essential users still had priority and more access to the limited fuel reserves. The most transformative solution was the gazogène wood generator, a bulky metal furnace bolted on a vehicle that burned charcoal and firewood to produce combustible gas that could then be fed into the engine. The technology wasn't new to France, as France had experimented with wood gas, alcohol blends, and coal gas for nearly 20 years. But before 1940, these were niche projects, curiosities for engineers and hobbyists. This all changed when gasoline disappeared, and the country had no choice but to adopt alternative fuels on the massive scale. In the first year alone, somewhere between 40,000 to 100,000 vehicles were fitted with gazogène generators. Factories that had been making pre-war products were suddenly churning out these wood gas generators. Foresters, charcoal makers, and mechanics were all pulled into a nationwide supply chain. Even tractors and commercial trucks were subject to mandatory conversions. As one might expect, the wood used to fuel these generators also experienced its own supply chain issues and shortages. There were really no good solutions to turn to. By January 1944, more than 120,000 vehicles were running on wood gas. They were slow, smoky, and temperamental. In a country starved of gasoline, the mere fact that they could still move made all the difference. Their alternatives existed in World War II France, but not all of them worked so well. Electric vehicles existed before the war, but they were extremely rare. They made up less than 0.3% of all French vehicles. By late 1941, roughly 2,500 electric vehicles operated in major cities. They were reliable, but painfully slow and limited to short-range urban use. Acetylene vehicles had a brief moment in the spotlight before being banned. The chemicals required were too important for industry and munition production to allow civilian use in vehicles. Alcohol fuels presented another desperate solution. Some civilians siphoned industrial alcohol to power their automotive engines, which caused a problem for industry. Alcohol was essential for explosives and chemical production. So basically the German war effort. So the government added chemicals that would destroy engines if used, effectively limiting civilian use of these alcohol fuels in their cars and vehicles. By late 1943, fuel control tightened across all of France, whether underneath the Vichy administration or the German occupation. Wood and charcoal were rationed, fuel products centralized, and thousands of vehicles were forced into conversion quotas. The result was a nationwide improvisation that was messy, authoritarian, resource-starved, but functional enough to keep the country moving, but just barely. With trucks halted and buses restricted, France's railway had to become the backbone of transport. But the system was under enormous strain. Locomotives ran non-stop, maintenance schedules were delayed, spare parts were scarce, and coal was rationed, and the coal that was available was often low quality. Secondary rail lines were disrupted or slowed as resources were prioritized for the primary or essential routes. Making things worse, by 1943, the railways became a battleground. The resistance sabotaged rails, derailed locomotives, damaged switches, and destroyed other rail infrastructure to disrupt the transport and slow German logistics. The Allies also joined in, bombing hubs, bridges, depots, and general rail infrastructure. With vehicles stalled and trains under scrutiny, the humble bicycle became France's lifeline. Farmers, doctors, delivery workers, and school children relied on two wheels to keep life moving. Families patched tires, rigged baskets, and used it to carry their daily life essentials. Small acts of ingenuity that defined System D. For the resistance, bicycles were even more vital. Carriers bypassed checkpoints, avoided fuel permits, and traveled hidden routes carrying messages, weapons, and supplies where cars and trains could not go or where they would be caught. While gazogènes kept the skeleton of France moving, bicycles kept the heart alive by moving its citizens during daily life. The occupied French government didn't solely rely on improvisation. Officials tried increasingly desperately to secure fuel through international diplomacy. Germany initially promised small allocations of fuel, but most captured French reserves were kept for German use. As the war intensified, particularly on the Eastern Front, German authorities grew impatient with France's petitions for more gasoline. Meanwhile, the Allies refused to allow any petroleum shipments to continental France. From their perspective, every drop that entered Axis-controlled territories risked aiding the German war effort. The Allies permitted limited shipments to French overseas territories, especially North Africa, as long as the fuel never reached metropolitan France or German forces. These shipments helped maintain colonial administration and local civilian life, but they did nothing for the shortages in Europe. France's pre-war investments in refineries, tankers, and petroleum infrastructure had been designed to secure independence, but once the country fell under Axis control, those assets became irrelevant. By 1941, it was clear France could not obtain oil from the outside world. It had to reinvent transportation on its own. And the fuel crisis didn't just stop transportation during World War II, it followed people straight into their homes. Coal and heating oil became extremely scarce under the occupation, with most supplies diverted to industry or the Germans. Ordinary families were left with almost nothing to heat their homes or cook with. According to wartime forestry reports, France entered what officials called the Age of Wood. Firewood, charcoal, and even sawdust cakes became essential for heating and cooking when modern fuels disappeared. Forest owners were legally required to increase harvesting, and entire regions relied on wood just to stay warm. Even then, it often wasn't enough. Parisian records note that many homes hovered around freezing, close to 0 degrees Celsius throughout the winter. To deal with this, families wore layers indoors, gathered around tiny stoves, and burned scrap wood or fallen branches just to make a meal or heat a single room. It definitely wasn't comfortable, but for many, it was the only way to survive the winters of the occupation. The fuel crisis in occupied France wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a collapse of an entire modern way of life and system. Cars disappeared from the streets, trucks couldn't run, trains were pushed to their limits, and people had to figure out entirely new ways to move, travel, cook, and just to stay alive. Every part of life had to adapt. Some drove slow, smoky gazogène trucks because there was no gasoline left. Others relied on bicycles patched together from whatever parts they could find. Families burned firewood, charcoal, and even sawdust cakes to heat their homes when coal and heating oil ran out. And many apartments, especially in Paris, stayed close to freezing all winter. None of these solutions were perfect. Most were uncomfortable, inefficient, or barely functional, but they kept people going. And in that struggle to adapt, to improvise with almost nothing, the spirit that fueled the French resistance took shape. The creativity and resilience that people used to keep farms running, deliver mail, or warm a kitchen were the same skills that helped resistance groups move, communicate, and survive under occupation. If you haven't seen the earlier videos in this mini-series, check them out to see how France also improvised its way through food shortages and clothing scarcity. The videos will be linked down below in the description, and if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the hype button on your mobile device if it's available. It genuinely helps these stories reach more people. Speaking about reaching more people, share this video with someone who loves history and let me know in the comments. What part of France's fuel crisis surprised you the most? This is Brave Builds, where history, kit, and reenacting come together to honor their ingenuity and their courage, because their stories deserve to be remembered.